Hello and welcome. Today we're delving into a fascinating area where multiple scientific disciplines converge, the world of polymer brushes and grafted polymers. This field sits at the intersection of polymer science, interfacial chemistry, colloidal science, and nanostructuring. We'll explore the fundamental science, synthesis, and characterization of these unique systems. But more importantly, we'll examine how a second powerful intersection with artificial intelligence and machine learning, or AI/ML, is said to revolutionize this entire field, pushing it towards a future of fully autonomous, self-driving laboratories.
So let's begin by defining our central topic. What exactly are polymer brushes?
Imagine polymers, long-chain molecules, that are not floating freely in a solution or existing in a solid bulk material. Instead, they are tethered at one end to a surface. This could be a flat surface, like a silicon wafer, or a curved surface, like a tiny nanoparticle. The way these tethered chains behave is governed by their confinement. The term polymer brush specifically refers to a state where these polymer chains are grafted to the surface at a very high density. To understand this, we need to consider a property called the radius of gyration, or Rg, which is essentially the average size of a polymer coil in a solution. When the distance between grafting points on the surface is much larger than this radius of gyration, the polymer chains have plenty of space. They can adopt a relaxed coiled conformation that looks a bit like a mushroom.
However, as we increase the grafting density and the chains are packed closer and closer together, they begin to run out of room. To minimize their unfavorable interactions with neighboring chains and maintain their entropic freedom, they are forced to stretch away from the surface, perpendicular to it. This extended, stretched-out state is what we call a polymer brush. If the density becomes extremely high, we enter a high-density brush regime, where the chains are even more stretched. This unique architecture, a dense layer of oriented polymer chains, gives rise to remarkable properties. For example, in the field of tribology, which studies friction and lubrication, polymer brushes can dramatically reduce friction between surfaces. In biomedical applications, they can be used to create non-fouling surfaces that resist the adhesion of proteins and cells, which is crucial for medical implants and biosensors. They can also be designed to be stimuli responsive, meaning the brushes can change their conformation, collapsing or swelling, in response to changes in their environment, like temperature, pH, or light. These brushes can be applied to almost any kind of substrate: flat surfaces, colloids, nanoparticles, and even at the interface between two different media, like liquid and gas. The concept also applies across dimensionalities. You can have polymers grafted onto a single polymer chain, which is a 1D substrate, a flat plane, which is 2D, or a particle, which is a 3D substrate. Now, how do we create these structures? There are generally three main strategies for attaching polymers to a surface. The first, and perhaps most common for creating high-density brushes, is the grafting from method. Here, initiator molecules are first anchored to the surface. Then, monomers are introduced from the surrounding solution or gas phase, and the polymerization process is initiated directly from these surface-bound sites. The polymer chains grow outwards from the surface. This method, often called surface-initiated polymerization, or SIP, is highly effective for achieving the high grafting densities needed for true polymer brushes. The second method is grafting onto. In this approach, fully formed polymers are synthesized first, with a reactive functional group at one end. These pre-made polymers are then brought into contact with a surface they can bond to. While this method is versatile, the chains that have already attached to the surface create a steric barrier, making it difficult for new chains to approach and attach. This entropic and enthalpic penalty means that grafting onto typically results in lower grafting densities compared to grafting from. The third strategy is grafting through. This involves a surface that is coated with polymerizable groups. As a polymer chain grows in the solution nearby, it can incorporate these surface-bound groups into its backbone, effectively stitching itself to the surface as it grows. Of these, the grafting from, or SIP approach, has been the subject of extensive research because it offers excellent control over the final structure.
A wide array of modern polymerization techniques have been adapted for SiP, including living polymerizations like anionic and cationic methods, and controlled radical polymerizations like atom transfer radical polymerization, ATRP, and reversible addition fragmentation chain transfer, RAFT polymerization. These living techniques are particularly powerful because they allow for precise control over the length of the polymer chains and even allow for the growth of block copolymers, where the brush is made of sequential blocks of different monomers. The authors of this paper highlight their own early contributions in this area, such as developing living anionic surface-initiated polymerization, or LISIP, on substrates like silicon, gold, and even clay nanoparticles. They also demonstrated the versatility of these methods by creating stimuli-responsive polymers on pattern films and using electrochemical methods to control the grafting process. For instance, they developed a technique where macro-initiators are electrodeposited onto a conducting surface, creating a pattern layer from which polymer brushes can then be grown. This allows for spatial control over where the brushes form. Beyond simple flat surfaces, the field has expanded to more complex and hybrid systems. Colloidal particles and nanoparticles are particularly interesting substrates because of their high surface-to-volume ratio. Coating nanoparticles with polymer brushes creates a core shell structure that is useful in everything from plasmonic sensing to improving the properties of nanocomposites. Star polymers can be thought of as zero-dimensional substrates for brushes, with polymer arms radiating from a central core. The authors have used these star copolymers to stabilize gold and platinum nanoparticles, creating hybrid materials with unique transport properties. Another critical area is the modification of 2D materials like graphene. Graphene oxide, or GO, has rich surface chemistry that allows for the grafting of polymer brushes. The authors describe their work in functionalizing GO and using these polymer-grafted nanoparticles to enhance the properties of other materials, such as improving the rheology of oil-based drilling fluids, or creating nanocomposite coatings that confine corrosive ions. This brings us to the next crucial question. Once we've synthesized these intricate nanostructures, how do we study and characterize them? The methods used depend heavily on the substrate. For polymer brushes on flat, ultra-thin films, a suite of surface-sensitive techniques is employed. Ellipsometry can measure the thickness and refractive index of the brush layer. Quartz crystal microbalance, or QCM, can measure the mass of the grafted layer, including any solvent that it absorbs, giving insight into swelling behavior. Atomic force microscopy, or AFM, can probe the topography and mechanical properties of the surface. Surface plasmon resonance, or SPR, is highly sensitive to changes in the refractive index near a metal surface and is excellent for monitoring binding events or film growth in real time. X-ray and neutron reflectometry can provide detailed information about the density profile of the brush perpendicular to the surface. For brushes on colloidal particles, different techniques are required. Light scattering methods can determine the size of the particle-brush hybrid, and techniques like transmission or scanning electron microscopy, or TEM or SEM, can be used for direct visualization. The authors emphasize the power of combining, or hyphenating these techniques, often for in situ or real-time measurements. For example, they've paired electrochemistry with SPR to monitor the properties of polymer films as their electrochemical state changes. They've also pioneered the use of techniques like single-molecule spectroscopy to understand how ions diffuse through the complex environment of a polyelectrolyte brush. All of this experimental work is complemented by simulation and theoretical modeling. Traditional models of polymer brushes often start with static properties, trying to predict the brush height and conformation. These models use concepts like self-consistent field theories and scaling relationships, which relate properties like brush thickness to the number of monomers and the grafting density. However, polymer brushes are highly dynamic systems. Molecular dynamics, or MD, simulations can provide a more detailed atomistic picture. A snapshot from such a simulation shows us the initial setup, initiator sites distributed on a substrate, a solution of free monomers above it, and the resulting grown polymer brush. These simulations can help us understand swelling behavior, the effects of shear forces in tribology, and stimuli-responsive transitions. But these simulations are computationally very expensive. Furthermore, with the vast number of possible monomers, grafting densities, solvents, and chain architectures, both experimental exploration and simulation face a combinatorial explosion.
the parameter space is simply too large to explore using traditional methods. This is where the second intersection of our topic comes into play, the integration of artificial intelligence and machine learning.
The paper argues that AI ML represents a fundamental shift away from the traditional trial and error Addisonian approach to a data-driven discovery paradigm. Instead of relying solely on intuition and hypothesis, researchers can use AI algorithms to find patterns in high-dimensional data, predict properties, and guide experiments toward optimal outcomes. To do this, chemical information needs to be translated into a format that a machine can understand. One common way is using SMILE strings, which represent complex molecular structures as a line of text. These strings, along with other calculated molecular descriptors, become the inputs for ML models. One powerful approach highlighted is Bayesian optimization, or BO. Unlike a simple grid search where every combination of parameters is tested, BO intelligently explores the parameter space. It uses a surrogate model to build a probabilistic map of how inputs relate to outputs. It then uses this map to decide the next best experiment to run, one that balances exploitation, testing in areas it knows are good, and exploration, testing in areas of high uncertainty to learn more. This makes the process of finding optimal conditions for synthesis or performance much more efficient. The paper also points to the roles of more advanced AI. Generative models like variational autoencoders or generative adversarial networks, GANs, can be used to invent new monomer sequences or polymer architectures that are predicted to have desired properties. Reinforcement learning, an area of AI where an agent learns by trial and error in a simulated environment, can be used to develop optimal step-by-step synthesis procedures. And critically, to ensure these AI models are not just black boxes, techniques like SHAP values are used. SHAP, which stands for Shapley Additive Explanations, allows researchers to understand why a model made a certain prediction by quantifying the contribution of each input feature, like chain length or hydrophobicity, to the final result. So, how is this AI/ML toolkit being applied specifically to polymer brushes? First, in simulation and design. By training ML models on data from existing atomistic or MD simulations, we can create much faster surrogate models that can predict equilibrium behavior, interfacial forces, or friction coefficients without the high computational cost. The paper gives several examples. ML models have been used to explore the behavior of polyanionic brushes, to predict the hydrophilic or hydrophobic properties of a brush based on its chemical structure, and to understand the complex ion transport and solvation effects within polyelectrolyte brushes. A key area of focus has been predicting and optimizing the anti-fouling properties of polymer brushes, which is critical for biomedical applications. Models have been developed to forecast protein adsorption based on parameters like molecular weight, grafting density, and monomer type. Next, AI/ML is being integrated directly into characterization techniques, making them more powerful and automated. Let's consider atomic force microscopy, or AFM. AFM can be a slow and laborious process. For instance, an ML algorithm can analyze a low-resolution image of a sample to intelligently select the most interesting locations for a high-resolution scan. During the scan itself, ML can improve the process by integrating data from simulations to achieve better results. For data analysis, which is often the most time-consuming part, deep learning can be used to automatically recognize and measure features in an image, such as the size of domains in a polymer blend. Researchers are even using AI to create a virtual AFM, generating synthetic AFM images from molecular structures, which can be used to train other models. This enhancement applies to other techniques as well. In surface plasmon resonance, ML-driven methods can help denoise the signal and improve detection limits, which is vital for biosensing. In ellipsometry, neural networks can rapidly and accurately solve the complex inverse problem of determining a film's optical constants from raw measurement data. This replaces a slow, iterative fitting process with an almost instantaneous one. Similarly, for X-ray and neutron reflectrometry, neural networks can predict scattering profiles, and for QCM, ML algorithms can help analyze complex viscoelastic data to better understand film properties. For spectrochemical methods like XPS and FTIR, ML can automate the analysis of complex spectra to quantify elemental compositions or identify functional groups. The integration of AI/ML into synthesis, simulation, and characterization all leads to a single transformative vision: the Autonomous Self-Driving Laboratory, or SDL. An SDL is a closed-loop system where a robotic platform physically carries out experiments, analytical instruments characterize the results, and an AI brain analyzes the data in real time to decide what experiment to do next. The goal is to create a virtuous cycle of data, feedback, experimentation that can operate continuously with minimal human intervention. The paper provides a compelling visual of what such a system looks like. We see a central robotic arm that moves samples between different stations. There's a station for mixing precursor inks for synthesis, a spray coating station to create the thin films, and various characterization stations, for example for microscopy or conductivity measurements. The AI planner, likely using a method like Bayesian optimization, designs an experiment. The robot executes the synthesis. The sample is moved to a characterization station. The data is fed back to the AI, which updates its internal model of the system and designs the next experiment, aiming to optimize a target property. A timeline of this process shows how multiple samples can be processed in parallel, enabling a throughput of hundreds of unique experiments per day. This is a dramatic acceleration compared to traditional research. The paper mentions several examples of such systems already in development, like Panda, a low-cost SDL for studying conducting polymers, and Polybot, a more comprehensive system for polymer electronics. So where does this leave us, and what is the future for the field of polymer brushes? The paper concludes by framing this as an ongoing paradigm shift. Researchers to rapidly navigate the vast chemical and structural parameter space to discover new materials with tailored functionalities. The authors outline several key frontiers. First is the hardware or plumbing challenge, perfecting the microreactors and microfluidics needed to handle the often viscous and complex chemistries involved in polymer synthesis autonomously. Second is the exploration of advanced hybrid systems, such as AI-optimized hairy nanoparticles for targeted drug delivery, or highly sensitive lab-on-a-chip diagnostic devices based on responsive polymer brushes. Ultimately, these AI-driven workflows are poised to redefine not just academic research, but also industrial R&D in areas like coatings, pharmaceuticals, and biosensors. The authors even suggest that AI-designed polymer brushes could be used for challenges like optimizing bulk solid handling or creating highly selective sorbents or recovering critical minerals from waste streams. The future of polymer brush science, and indeed much of material science, lies in this powerful synergy between human expertise, AI-driven navigation of chemical space, and autonomous hardware that executes the data-driven vision. The promise is a radical transformation, shrinking discovery timelines from years-long processes into something previously unimaginably short. Thank you.